Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Well, it's finally here. Rise of the Dreadmoon, the first all-new quest expansion for Avalon Hill's new edition of HeroQuest. The first all-new, fully official quest expansion for HeroQuest in 30 years. As bizarre as it may sound, that makes me a little bit emotional, and it does mean that this is a milestone occasion. For people who grew up with this game, let it slip away and then discovered it again as an adult, for people who only recently played HeroQuest for the first time thanks to Avalon Hill's new edition, for people who had only heard the legends, and for people who had held this game tight since 1989 and never let it go. It's big. It's too big, really. And it is inevitable, sadly inevitable, that for me at least, the expansion could never live up to the weight of such expectations. Let's see how close it got though. By the time this video goes live, a lot of people will know quite a bit about this expansion. Some people got their expansions earlier and shared a lot of information online before the official street date. Furthermore, on HeroQuest Day, Avalon Hill arranged for a livestream playthrough of the first quest from this expansion, and that's on top of the teasers they have shared in recent weeks to ramp up excitement. That being the case, I am sure some of the contents of this video will be old news, so feel free to check out the timestamps in the video description if you need to jump ahead. Also note, in this video I will try to avoid spoilers as much as possible. I will be making a second spoiler heavy video in which I talk much more about the specifics of the quest, and that should go live on the channel in a couple of days. First things first, the plot. The heroes have rescued the elf princess and returned her home, but now everything has gone to heck in a handbag. Elathorn is in the grip of civil unrest. Some Guardian Knights were sent to check it out, and in particular to hunt down the traitorous Sir Ragnar who is involved in some way, but they haven't been heard from. Now the Night of the Dreadmoon is coming, which will strengthen the forces of Dread. The heroes have to sneak into Elathorn and try to uncover what's going on before Dread becomes too powerful and Elathorn is destroyed. Sound good? Right, let's look in the box. First of all, you have your punch board of tokens. Under that is the quest book, which was wrapped in tissue, but I already removed that before filming. And then under that you have two plastic inserts. The top insert has all the cards, two plastic stands for some cardboard mirrors, and then half the miniatures. The bottom tray holds the rest of the miniatures and has an empty well where you can put all of your punched out tokens. In terms of plastic, with one particularly egregious oversight, we are quite spoiled here, and I would imagine for many people one of the most exciting things is the inclusion of the Guardian Knight hero. I probably don't need to rake up this old ground again, but just in case some people aren't aware, the Commander of the Guardian Knight was a retailer exclusive character pack released at the time Avalon Hill pushed the core game out to stores. The intention was to give stores an incentive to stock the game. The only problem was, a lot of HeroQuest fans were frightfully annoyed that there was a brand new hero for the game that was incredibly rare and which many people missed out on. To remedy this, Avalon Hill created a new knight sculpt, made some new card art, and packaged a brand new but mechanically identical version of the Guardian Knight in the Rise of the Dreadmoon expansion. And I think this is a great move. It is, to my mind, the best way to resolve a bad situation. Those who have the original Commander character still have something exclusive and special, but now everybody has access to an official version of that hero, so no gameplay elements are gated off. Now I am 100% convinced that it was not the original intention to have a Guardian Knight hero in this expansion. The Knight is a superb inclusion and a clear move by Avalon Hill to correct a mistake and do right by the fans. I can't fault that, but it feels absolutely tagged on. The Knight doesn't seem well integrated into what's happening in the story. For the Frozen Horror, the Barbarian was given centre stage. Similarly, in Mage of the Mirror, the Elf got the limelight. In both of those expansions, those heroes were at the forefront. The quest books included solo quests specifically designed for them, the plots revolved around them, and there was a section in the rules talking about how you could incorporate the heroes into your games. The Knight doesn't get any of that. There are no solo quests for them, there is no section of the rules about how to incorporate the Knight into your games, they are just there in the box. Now admittedly the storyline for this expansion does mention the Guardian Knights, but a mention is about all they get. More on that later in the spoiler video. Worst of all though, there are actually numerous mechanisms in this expansion that seem to directly combat the benefits of having a Knight on your team. For example, one new mechanism allows heroes to wear disguises, but to do so they are not allowed to wear chainmail or plate armour, and the knight is someone you really want to have in full armour. There is also a ruling here that I think is clear enough, but which I can see some people arguing over. The rules for disguises say you can wear no armour other than bracers and helmets. By my reading, that means the knight can still use their handheld shield, which is essential for several of their skills, but I bet some people would claim the contrary. And that sort of thing feels a bit sloppy, a complaint that I will level elsewhere in this review. Nevertheless, I am happy to see the knight, who will definitely be my go-to hero from now on. For those who have never seen one in action before, they are a pretty solid hero choice. Attack 2 dice, defend 3 dice, body 7, mind 2. They start with a short sword and a shield, and that shield is important. A knight should never leave home without it. They have the innate ability that armour does not restrict their movement, which means they are the only hero I would ever consider loading up with plate armour without first giving them some way to boost their movement. Unless I wanted them to be in disguise, of course. The knight also gets 3 skills that can each be used once per mission. Shield block requires a shield and cancels the damage taken by a hero standing next to you. Argue amongst yourselves what next to you means. Stalwart also requires a shield, and when your body points are reduced to 0, you reduce them to 1 instead. Knight's Challenge allows the knight to be considered the treasure searcher when a wandering monster is revealed in the same room. This means the monster is placed next to the knight and attacks the knight instead of the player who originally searched. It doesn't say it on the skill card, but I wouldn't allow the knight to use this skill if there wasn't a space adjacent to them where the monster could attack from. Also, it is potentially dubious how this card interacts with a wandering monster trap, due to the language of the card specifying treasure searcher, but I don't believe there are any wandering monster traps in rooms in any of the official missions so far. I'm assuming the intent of the ability is to only work in those circumstances where someone has drawn a wandering monster card from the treasure deck after searching a room. But anyway, that's our new knight hero. Next up we have our other heroic characters, the 4 members of the Cadre of the Raven's Veil. Much was made of these characters, their presence was teased early on and everybody was speculating about them, nobody more so than me, and I couldn't have been further from the mark really. I had visions of another group of heroes who would turn up in different adventures, helping or hindering our heroes as their goals converged or their methods diverged, before eventually teaming up with them for an epic final mission. At the very least, I was expecting named characters that had their own personalities and backstories, but I was definitely envisioning something far beyond what the designers had in mind. Ultimately, the Cadre are mercenaries, just like the ones from Frozen Horror, with exactly the same special rules and stats. The only real difference is you have to unlock them as you play through the campaign, having encounters in certain missions that let you pick one member of the Cadre to join your roster of mercs for hire. Once you have found a mercenary, you can pay them to join on future quests. Alternatively, you can spend a reputation token to hire them for free. Paid mercs require payment before each quest, full price on the first outing, half price on subsequent outings, while a mercenary hired with reputation is with you until death. Now admittedly, I'm disappointed the Cadre weren't something more, but I think that disappointment is largely my own fault. The teasers from Avalon Hill led me to expect too much of the campaign, and my imagination got away from me. This is true of many things, not least the return of Sir Ragnar, and I would say to anyone who has let themselves get really hyped for what this expansion promises, just temper your expectations a little. It's a really good expansion, but it's still very much a HeroQuest expansion. There is definitely a lot to like about how the mercenaries are used here. The idea is they are scattered throughout the city in hiding. The fact you have to seek them out before you can employ them is fantastic storytelling. It's in keeping with the narrative and gives more of a sense that you are adventuring in a real, living, breathing location. You aren't the only heroes fighting. These secretive characters are sneaking around in the darkness, advancing their own plots and hoping to link up with allies who can further their goals. Finding a new ally is an exciting prospect, like completing a side quest, and watching your team of allies grow, a network of spies you can call on when the going gets tough, is a wonderful concept. Making you find them and earn their loyalty is a genius concept and makes them feel much more special than mercs we have worked with previously. I would have preferred it if the Raven's Veil had been heroes in their own right, with more personality, but nevertheless, within the confines of the adventure and the simple nature of HeroQuest in general, this is still a fascinating idea. Next we have all of our new baddies. This is a really interesting bunch. Several of them I have already discussed at depth in other videos, so I will try to be brief here. First are the Spectres. You get 3 and they are in translucent plastic. Movement 8, attack 3, defend 3, 1 body and 0 mind. They have the undead and ethereal keywords. Ethereal meaning they can move through heroes, walls and other solid objects, and they are not affected by caltrops, although it's important to note they cannot phase through a wall into an unexplored part of the map. Additionally, you have to roll a black shield instead of a skull to hit them in combat, so your odds of causing a hit with each dice decrease to just 1 in 6. To make matters worse, the Spectres can use the Channel Dread spell, which is new for this expansion. You roll a dice, add 1 for each adjacent monster that can also cast the Channel Dread spell, and if you score a 4 or 5 you inflict a wound on the target, score a 6 and you inflict 2 wounds. Next up are the Dread Cultists. You get 4 of them in grey plastic. They are move 7, attack 2, defend 2, body 1 and 2 mind points. They have the Channel Dread spell, although they can only cast it once per quest, and they have the Dreadlight spell which targets a hero and gives every monster 1 extra attack dice when they are attacking that hero. I like that the Dread Cultists have spells that are specifically about channeling dread, and that in both cases they are spells that benefit from being in large groups. It's very fitting to see them using magic that becomes stronger through their unity of purpose. It makes them feel like cultists, which is exactly what you would expect. Next are the Magus Guards. You get 2 of these and the sculpts are lovely. They are move 8, attack 4, defend 4, 3 body and 3 mind. They have the dread spells Ball of Flame and Tempest, which they can each cast once per game. I've already talked about these extensively in another video, but to briefly reiterate my thoughts, I do feel these enemies don't have a strong enough theme. As warrior mages and elves, I would expect them to have spells that dovetail with an aggressive melee focused playstyle. I really would have liked to see spells that spoke of their intensive training as elite guards and which perhaps drew from elven magic rather than dread magic. Then you get 2 elven assassins. I do like these miniatures, although they aren't as cool as the Magus Guard. They have a movement of 10, attack 5, defend 3, 2 body points and 3 mind. They pack a real punch, and as an added insult they can attack diagonally. Diagonal attacks are very useful, but I do think I was expecting something slightly more from the assassins. Perhaps the ability to move through other heroes, drop a smoke bomb, something like that. You also get 2 elven warriors and 2 elven archers, 4 unique sculpts. These are exactly the same both in terms of the miniatures and the mechanisms as the elves from the Mage of the Mirror expansion. The warriors are move 6, attack 4, defend 3, body 3 and mind 2 with no special skills. The archers are move 6, attack 4, defend 2, body 3 and mind 2 with the ability to attack at range. In close quarters, they only roll 1 dice to attack. While it is slightly disappointing to get retreads of enemies from previous expansions, this is understandable. Avalon Hill cannot assume that players have access to previous expansions and the enemies they contained, and it's only right that all the necessary enemies are included in the box, even if they are enemies we have seen before. Finally, we have the Dread Wraith. This is the most powerful enemy in the expansion. It covers 2 squares and can attack all orthogonally and diagonally adjacent spaces. It has a movement of 9, 6 attack, 4 defend, 5 body points and 5 mind points. It has a movement of 9, 6 attack, 4 defend, 5 body points and 5 mind points. While it isn't undead, it is ethereal, so benefits from all the same perks the Spectres have. Additionally, it has access to the Dreadlights and Channel Dread spells, plus the Fear spell and a Summon Spectre spell for calling in reinforcements. Each of these spells can be cast once per quest. And that's it for the enemies. I think it's an interesting selection. With the exception of the Elven Warriors, all of the enemies do something new, or something that gives them an edge over the monsters from the core game. Giving magic to regular enemies is a big change and is going to shake up the game considerably. Now the heroes are going to be facing powerful spells on a much more regular basis, as those spells are no longer reserved for the bosses. And enemies that can phase through walls, attack diagonally and bypass armour are going to force the heroes to develop new strategies that don't rely on creating choke points and soaking attacks with a meat shield. This is the most interesting group of enemies since those from the Frozen Horror, and I would say they feel more balanced. In fact, I would say the whole expansion appears more balanced than the Frozen Horror, so I'm happy with this selection. But, yes, there is no miniature for Sir Ragnar. That dude on the cover art, the guy who is name dropped in the introductory text for the quest, the villain we saw concept art for months ago. Nope, no miniature. And there is a reason for that. Again, it's something I'm going to be talking about in my second spoiler video. But while the developers somehow thought it wasn't worth including a miniature for Sir Ragnar, they did think it was worth giving us some more reskins of furniture we already have, so we get a table, a wardrobe and a sorcerer's table with a new elvish style. Note that this new furniture is considerably larger than the versions from the core set. I'm guessing they have been scaled up to better fill the spaces on the game board, as the original furniture was a touch on the small side, but it does look a bit weird, and the table is ugly. It should also be noted that there is a new special rule for the sorcerer's table which represents a shrine to the moon. The elf or anybody with a lunar charm can use the table to restore 1 body point and 1 mind point when they search a room containing a sorcerer's table. This effect is in addition to any normal effect from searching. Interesting idea, but I wish Avalon Hill took a bit more care in remembering what they have done with the game previously. They created an elven character called the Rogue Heir of Elathorn. Not just an elf, but a noble of the elven realm. Yet by the rules as presented here, the rogue heir would not be able to benefit from the elven shrine without a lunar charm. Perhaps this is by intent, as the rogue heir isn't magical, but it feels off to me, like an oversight because Avalon Hill didn't remember the rogue was a thing when they were putting this expansion together. Speaking about special rules for furniture, this expansion also adds a special rule for alchemist benches. A wizard or any hero with a regent kit, a new piece of equipment for Rise of the Dreadmoon, can spend an action while adjacent to the alchemist bench to make a potion. This is interesting because a common complaint with HeroQuest is that the furniture doesn't have enough purpose. I have always thought the furniture did what it was intended to do, adding context to an environment, helping to develop the narrative, while also altering the shape of a room and giving an indication that the room might contain a special treasure. But Avalon Hill have clearly been listening to the fan chatter, and they have given certain furniture elements additional properties, which is no bad thing, especially as those additional properties are interesting and feed into the story of the quest. I can see this being something that continues as they develop new expansions, with furniture gaining location-specific properties. Moving on, we get the poster children for HeroQuest expansions, a wooden door and an iron door, again with elven flair. Not much to say about these that I haven't already said in every other review for every other expansion. Then we get 3 new items of furniture. There's an arcane prison, which is technically the elven version of the rack and has a little transparent insert that shows a person trapped in the magical vortex. Then you get 2 statues. I wonder if they will spring to life and absolutely surprise the heroes who would never be expecting random statues to spring to life. Please, for the love of all that's holy, can we stop having statues that spring to life, please? Besides all the plastic crack, there is a single punchboard containing tokens and map overlays. One of the things I really felt was missing from Mage of the Mirror was a set of overlays that would transform the dungeon environment so it felt more like an elven kingdom. Rise of the Dreadmoon does go some way to addressing that complaint, but to me, doesn't go far enough. You get 1 new map overlay, which has an outdoor plaza on one side and a hideout on the reverse. The plaza is interesting because it doesn't have walls, so when you place it you are opening up the map considerably and you are going to have to think much more carefully about line of sight. The hideout on the reverse represents secret places where rebel fighters can hole up to stay safe. The hideout has an alchemist bench the heroes can use to make potions, can be searched without risk of traps or wandering monsters, and allows each hero to heal once per mission. To heal, the heroes roll 1 dice. The score of the dice represents the number of points they can divide up between recovering body points and mind points. For example, a roll of 2 would allow a hero to recover 2 body, 2 mind, or 1 point of each. I really like these new locations. They add a lot, not just with the hideout special rules, but with how the plaza can open up an environment. However, I just don't think this expansion has enough of this kind of stuff. 1 map tile isn't going to do much to make your dungeon board feel like an elven kingdom. Worse still, there are some adventures in the quest that have special locations that would have benefited from map overlays that aren't included. For example, the first quest involves moving around underground waterways, where some of the rooms and corridors are flooded, but there are no overlays to indicate where the water is. Without overlays, the game loses a lot of the visual appeal and table presence that is a trademark of HeroQuest. Furthermore, it makes it difficult to tell from glancing at the board where the environmental hazards are. Imagine the frozen horror without the frozen stream tile, or the ice chute tile. That's what we have here. I think it would be a really good idea for Avalon Hill to at least put together a tile set as a downloadable PDF for people who would like to print off their own waterway overlays. Failing that, I'm making my own. There are also 2 new mirrors with the plastic stands to hold them. Why we are still getting cardboard mirrors instead of plastic ones beats me. I think I would have preferred the mirrors rather than another table or a wardrobe, but that's just me. Then we have reputation tokens. This is a fascinating new mechanism exclusively for use with this campaign. The heroes have infiltrated the city where a civil war is raging, and they need to rally people to their aid. As they fight against oppression, their legend grows, and they gain reputation represented by these tokens. There are 6 round tokens representing 1 reputation, and then a special token representing 5 reputation. These tokens are earned for specific actions during missions or for completing a quest, and they can be sold between quests for 250 gold or can be used to hire mercenaries for free. There are 8 lunar charms. These are acquired through the campaign and have a specific purpose relating to the mission. There are 6 caltrop tokens to represent caltrop traps and the caltrops dropped by heroes. The reverse of 3 of these show smoke bombs, and this is something that has happened in every HeroQuest expansion, and I really don't like it. The double-sided tokens often have completely different purposes depending on which side you are using, and that's not really very convenient. Imagine a game where you have dropped 3 caltrops and then you want to use a smoke bomb. You spend ages searching for a smoke bomb token, only to realise they are all on the board already, hidden on the reverse of the caltrop tokens you have used. I understand wanting to get double use out of bits of card and keeping down production costs, but it's frankly annoying and can cause unnecessary delays while playing. This complaint also extends to the double-sided map overlays, but for a different reason. Because there it just limits what you can do when you are designing your own maps. For example, you can never have a plaza and a hideout in the same mission. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it does irk me, and it makes things just a little bit less user-friendly. The other tokens include 2 trapdoors. These are the same as the trapdoors from previous expansions, allowing fast warping across the environment. They have strangers on the reverse that are NPCs you can find on your quest, which may help you. Then there are 5 more character tokens. These have the 4 Ravensvale members and the Elf Assassin pictured on one side, and completely different characters on the reverse. They will be used in different quests to represent people you find on your travels. Finally, there are 4 disguise tokens. I mentioned this mechanism briefly already when talking about the Knight, and it's a really fascinating idea. One of the things that Rise of the Dreadmoon is doing, and doing pretty well, is incorporating elements of light role-playing. There are NPCs to talk to, little side quests, a deeper, more engaging narrative, puzzles to solve, and adventures that are more about exploration and interacting with characters rather than fighting. At the beginning of some quests you have the chance to take a disguise. Pro tip, always take the disguise and keep it as long as possible. Whilst disguised, heroes gain benefits specific to the quest. They may be able to walk past guards, talk to NPCs who would otherwise flee from them, gain access to locked off areas of the board, avoid traps and wandering monsters, or even stroll up next to patrolling enemies and kill them instantly without even rolling dice. You can tell yourself you are hitting the guards on the head to knock them out, if you like, but we all know you're slitting their throats, don't deny it. To maintain your disguise, you are only allowed to use daggers, short swords, hand axes and staffs. You are not allowed to cast spells or wear any armour other than helmets and bracers, and you must have your disguise token. At any point, heroes can choose to throw off their disguise, at which point you can re-equip them with all their regular armour and weapons, which I guess they had hidden inside their cloaks. Or a bag of holding, I don't know. It's a really neat idea though, and it reminds me very much of a game I have sitting on my shelf, Dragon Strike. Yeah, the one with the VHS starring Malibu from American Gladiators. Dragon Strike had quests that let you talk to monsters, sneak through locations or hunt for clues, adding elements of light role-playing to the trappings of the classic dungeon crawling board game. HeroQuest is now following in those footsteps, and it's really good. It's adding enough interesting new mechanisms to make this campaign feel fresh, but it isn't adding a lot of complexity. Phew, we are nearly through everything, just some cards left to look at. There is a 20 card alchemy deck divided into 7 craftable potions and 13 purchasable potions. During a quest, all 20 cards are shuffled together, and if the heroes ever find a random potion, they draw 1 card to see what they have got. They note the potion on their character sheet and return the card to the deck. If they are at an alchemist bench and they have the required ingredients and tools, they can make one of the craftable potions. Between quests, the wizard is allowed to craft any potions they have the ingredients for, and any heroes are allowed to purchase the purchasable potions for the cost on the card. The interesting thing about the new alchemy deck is that it completely replaces almost all of the potions from the equipment deck that you will have accrued from your previous expansions. You can take out all of those equipment cards and file them away for historical purposes, because from now on you will use the Alchemy deck instead. The Alchemy deck includes most potions from the game so far, but they have been cleaned up, removing some of the bloat that has accumulated in the game over time. Some have been recosted, for example the Potion of Restoration has gone from 500 gold to 300 gold, but more importantly, any potions that were previously exclusively usable by either the Barbarian or the Elf have been retooled for use with any character. For example, the Elvish Potion of Speed, which was previously 500 gold and could only be used by the Elf, is now the Potion of Celerity, a craftable item usable by anyone. Some people may lament the homogenizing of potion use, as it feels like it does take something away from the Elf and the Barbarian, and Lord knows the Barbarian needs something to make him feel special. But they do still get their exclusive equipment from their respective character quest packs, and it does make sense that potions can be used by any hero. The only existing potions that didn't make it into the Alchemy deck are Holy Water, which is really a weapon not a potion as you throw it at an enemy rather than drinking it, and then the Venom Antidote, which isn't required because there are better, cheaper healing potions in the Alchemy deck. Overall, I think this is a good change, as it tidies up the equipment deck, recosts things that were too expensive, gives all players more options and removes some unnecessary cards. It will also make it easier to add new potions in the future. Additionally, it's fun to note that there is a useless potion in the mix, Ogre's Grog. It either costs you 1 mind point or does nothing at all. I like this a lot, because it is the kind of thing you might find while randomly looting a dungeon. Furthermore, it's the kind of item that a tricksy Zargon player could find a use for, especially in an encounter with an NPC. This expansion also includes 5 equipment cards. You get a duplicate hand axe and helmet. I'm assuming these were included because you might need more of them for when heroes are disguised, but it feels like a pointless addition. I'm surprised they didn't include an extra shield and short sword card, as the knight starts with those items. But again, the knight feels a little bit shoehorned into this expansion to me, so I guess it wasn't thought about at the time. The other 3 pieces of equipment are new. You get the Regent Kit, which has 5 uses and allows any hero to make a potion at an alchemist's bench. There are caltrops a hero can throw on the floor. When a non-ethereal monster moves onto caltrops, they have to stop moving unless they roll a white shield on 1 dice. Then there is the Smoke Bomb, which you use on an adjacent monster. Until the monster's next turn, all heroes can move through that monster's space, which is a nice way of breaking through a defensive perimeter to attack a boss enemy at the back of the room. There are 8 new treasures you shuffle directly into the treasure deck. 2 poisons that inflict 1 point of mind damage if you roll a skull, and then 2 each of 3 different ingredients for use in creating potions. Then there are 7 artifacts. I'm not going to go through these in the video because I think these magical weapons and artifacts are things you should discover for yourself. But there's a couple of cool pieces of armour, some spell scrolls, a fancy weapon, a cloak and an artifact for using with crafting potions. None of these items are for the exclusive use of any one hero. The last thing in the box is the quest book itself, which includes all the rules and a 10-part campaign. Again, I'm not going to spoil the quests in this video. I'm going to do a completely separate spoiler-heavy video for Zargon players where I will talk about the campaign in more detail. But for the sake of this video, here are my thoughts in a vague, non-spoilery kind of way. The campaign looks solid. I think it has a strong storyline and a nice flow from quest to quest. In the core game in particular, and to a lesser degree in some expansions, the campaigns sometimes feel a bit disjointed, like you are wandering from one dungeon to the next without any strong narrative drive to do so. By contrast, Rise of the Dreadmoon has a tight hold on the reins. Each quest furthers the plot and leads nicely into the next adventure. It feels like a story is unfolding. Furthermore, the quests ask new and interesting things of the players. You aren't just running into rooms and hitting all the monsters. As you are working covertly in a city gripped by civil unrest, there is more exploration and sneaking around. The disguise mechanism is put to good use in numerous interesting ways. Unfortunately, there are no solo quests for the night, but the flip side of that is you get 10 full group missions, and the campaign has a little more chance to breathe as a result. I do think the story is probably the strongest element of this expansion. I'm still bothered that Avalon Hill have failed to reformat the cards to be consistent. I would love them to introduce a series of keywords that make each piece of equipment and every artifact easy to comprehend at a glance. I've talked about that in depth in previous videos. Just using consistent wording would help. I mean, the new spell scrolls don't even say they are one-use items. That information is printed in the Rise of the Dreadmoon quest book. However, all previous spell scrolls clearly state they are one-use items. So why was that information omitted from the scrolls in this expansion? Surely it's time for the consumable keyword for anything that's single use. Ultimately though, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. I do think that on first blush, without actually playing through the campaign, this does look like the best expansion since Return of the Witchlord. There's a lot more going on, the enemies are more interesting and seem to have more skills. It doesn't look as difficult as the Frozen Horror either, but I definitely wouldn't want to run this mission with brand new heroes. I think the special skills of the enemies make them far more threatening than what new heroes would be able to confidently deal with. Do I think it's an essential purchase? I guess that's a silly question. Nothing is essential, and yet with HeroQuest, everything is essential. I do think this particular expansion brings a lot of important things to the table. First of all, you get the Guardian Knight hero, which is a fantastic addition to the game and an awesome gesture from Avalon Hill. Every company makes mistakes. Not every company does something about them. Then you get the Alchemy deck and the Regents for crafting potions. I do feel this is important for clearing up the equipment deck and giving more heroes more potions to play with. I also assume that any new potions from here on out will go into the Alchemy deck, so it does feel like this is an important addition to the game that everyone should have. Finally, there are the enemies, which have an excellent variety of skills that are specifically intended to give Zargon more options for disrupting the most commonly employed hero tactics. In fact, I would say there is so much for Zargon to do in this campaign. Running NPCs and using enemies with real strategies, I wouldn't want to run this campaign using the HeroQuest companion app. Because of the slight step up in rules and the light role-playing elements, this is one adventure where I think you would really benefit from having someone sitting behind the Dungeon Master's screen. But there we go, that seems like 3 really strong reasons to add this expansion to your HeroQuest collection. However, it's not all great, or I guess more accurately, I should say it doesn't all live up to its promise. I think Avalon's Hill hype train for this expansion could have been its worst enemy, because all the things that, to me, were promoted as strong selling points weren't there. First of all, we had the promise of this expansive story, the second part of the Mage of the Mirror, the completion of an epic saga. We were told this was a continuation of that adventure, but it doesn't really feel that way. You could play Mage of the Mirror and never play Rise of the Dreadmoon, and it would feel complete. Similarly, you could play Rise of the Dreadmoon after skipping Mage of the Mirror and never feel like you missed out on an important plot. They are completely separate stories. Understandably, this was done so there was no requirement to purchase both, and that's okay, but anybody expecting this expansion to pull on existing plot threads are probably going to be disappointed. I feel like Rise of the Dreadmoon could have been set anywhere, and I didn't get a strong enough sense of a connection to the previous expansion. Next there is the Cadre of the Raven's Veil, a fantastic idea which is used really well, but which felt like it was going to be something so much bigger and grander than just the inclusion of generic mercs that you could employ to help you. Then there was the hint that the Guardian Knights were involved, which turned out to be more of a throwaway line included to explain the presence of the Guardian Knight hero in the box. And finally, there's Sir Ragnar, something which feels like the worst kind of bait and switch. I'm sure that after Avalon Hill made a big deal about his appearance, dragging up an old piece of lore from the original European version of the game and placing him centre stage on the box art, I couldn't have been the only person expecting a powerful new recurring enemy. A nemesis who could pop up time and again to thwart our plans. Someone whose fingerprints would be over many foul deeds as the campaign and maybe other campaigns unfolded. A character we could battle, maybe one day redeem. And yet, what we got? Well, I will talk more about Ragnar in my next video when I go through the campaign in depth. For now, to talk vaguely, I will say only this: he ain't all that. In summary, Rise of the Dreadmoon is special. Avalon Hill knows it's special. They dug up the lore about Ragnar, they tried to weave a story that incorporated previous villains, factions we have heard about in the lore, and information pieced together from other expansions, and they make other little nods to what has come before. There is even one point in the campaign where the heroes are awarded 1,989 gold pieces, 1989 being the publication date of the original game. It shows there was a lot of care put into this, and as a result, I do think we have one of the strongest entries in the series so far. There is so much to like, and even though there are things that I think could be improved or things I am disappointed with, overall I think Avalon Hill have done a fantastic job. But whoever decided we needed a new plastic table instead of a miniature to represent Sir Ragnar needs to spend some time in the arcane prison. And that's it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.